Metaphor ReFantazio has finally been released. After 7 long years of waiting, we finally have it. Was it worth the wait? Does it live up to the hype? Only one way to find out. Wait, this is Atlus's 4th release this year? Let's cut to the chase. For those who don't know, Metaphor ReFantazio was originally announced way back in December of 2016. Codenamed ReFantasy, we had no idea what this game was going to be about. Was it going to be SMT related? A new IP? Who was going to be behind it? This thing has been in the dark for over 6 years with little to no information. That was until the summer of 2023 that we finally got a glimpse as to what the game was going to be about. A brand new IP directed by Katsuro Hashino, also known as the guy who made Persona what it is today. This was a huge deal. We've known for a good while that Hashino wouldn't be as involved with the Persona brand as he used to be. So to see him follow up with a new franchise, that's pretty neat. That's not even mentioning all of the other big names here. Sojima, Meguro, all big names and people who played a big role in Persona's success. But you know the deal. Our good friends at Atlus have been nice enough to provide us with another review code. Once again, and I can't say this enough, thank you so much to Atlus for giving us this wonderful opportunity. Since the game has just been released, I want to focus this time on some overall first impressions and let you know if it's worth your time. Be sure to grab your favorite weapon, cause this is our first impressions on Metaphor ReFantazio. And as always, before we start, I just want to say that if you're enjoying our productions, or you want to see more Atlus-related stuff from us, be sure to press that subscribe button. And while you're at it, be sure to check out any of our other platforms if you haven't already. And with all that out of the way, let's get started. The story is pretty simple as usual. You play an unnamed protagonist. However, in Metaphor, there's now different races of, living beings? There's all kinds out there. Fairies, demi-humans, elves. Obviously, these aren't their official names, but you've got all kinds of people in this new world. Your job is to try to get to the royal capital of Grand Trad in order to become part of its army to stop a certain evil that's upon us. To give a little context, the king who used to rule over this kingdom you reside in was mysteriously killed. What could this mean? Who was the killer? Well, that would be King Louis, a former general for the army that you're applying to who rose up the ranks and took the life of the king in order to make himself the new ruler. It goes without saying that Louis himself is a bit of a jerk and doesn't care for the well-being of his people. Not only that, as we'll soon see the true motivation for our protagonist, he's responsible for sending a curse to a friend of ours. So basically the story really focuses on having to take down Louis as he tries to become the new ruler of Uchronia. I think I said that correctly. Overall, it's a pretty good plot so far. While the plot is pretty standard, just a typical defeat the great evil in power narrative, I actually feel like this works to its benefit. One of Metaphor's biggest strengths, in my opinion, is the world building. It's surprisingly very complex with unique names for all of the races you see here, how magic is this very rich and valuable power, and all the kinds of enemies you have to fight. Also, this is really dumb to mention, but I just see it funny how they call these monstrosities human. The game provides you with small notes about each of these things, and you're free to check back on them anytime you want. I highly recommend checking it out, if not just to keep up with all the lore, but it's amazing how well crafted it all is. As I said, I'm not the biggest fan of stories that focus on their world building, and I won't even bother trying to pronounce half of these things, but it's really impressive stuff. Heck, I'll go as far as to say that I can't wait to see what more I get as we go deeper into the game. What are Louis's motives for ruling over the kingdom? What other characters will join our cause to defeat him? What will the prince do if he gets the power to the throne? I'm genuinely much more invested than I would have thought for a story like this. That's not even mentioning all the neat characters you meet along the way. One thing you'll notice very quickly in this game is its attempt to tackle the subject of racism, and this game makes it very apparent in itself. You have people out in the capital insulting you for simply being an Elda, social classes that people can only be born into. Pretty interesting stuff. I've heard a lot of complaints that Atlus is being too on the nose about it, and sure, admittedly they do really emphasize how Eldas are a disgrace to the world, and it's insane that you're still even alive, but I never really saw that as an issue. Sure, you could have done this in a much more subtle way, but I think it's fine as it is. But that's enough of the harsh topics. Let's talk about all the neat characters you meet. Even though you're playing as your typical nameless protagonist for this story, he surprisingly has a lot of depth. Like I said before, you get to see your personal relationship with him and the prince, his passion for reading, and is just your average Joe who can do no wrong. Heck, he even has voice lines for when you choose a dialogue option. How can people hate this guy? One of my favorites so far has to be Stroll. You meet him fairly quickly once you're in the recruitment center to become part of the army. The second you meet him, he's already a pretty upstanding guy who just wants to fight for a good cause. He wants to bring justice to the world and defend it even if it's going to cost him his life. I can respect that. And it's only more notable once he awakens his archetype. We hear about how the village his family once lived in was destroyed by a human, so he just wants to be able to redeem himself and avenge his family. This is only seen in the first few hours of the game, by the way. I'm shocked at how clear and interesting they make these characters right off the bat. It only makes me want to know more about them. That, and we have to admit, it'll only make defeating Lewis all the more satisfying. So yeah, great job there, Atlas. There's way more characters you meet along the way too, like Maria, Grius, and more. No, I'm serious, that's literally his name. Overall, great cast of characters so far, and I can't wait to see what else they have to offer. I guess this is also a good time to start talking about the gameplay. I did just mention the archetypes after all, so let's get to it. Metaphor is practically Atlas getting the best elements of Persona and SMT, putting them in a blender, and making a smoothie out of it. And I mean this in the best possible way. As mentioned earlier, you have the famous press turn system taken from Shin Megami Tensei. You have your basic attacks, spells you can do, guard, all that fancy stuff. However, if you apply a spell an enemy is weak to, you'll be able to do one extra move that specific turn. You can use that for a spell, heal, basically anything. Heck, you can pass it on to another party member if you feel like they have something better to offer at the moment. There's a reason this system gets as much praise as it does, and I'm fine with them using it here. It's so simple, yet it makes fighting enemies so rewarding once you master how to abuse weaknesses and chaining several attacks together. That's not all though. One addition they made is the option to either go in front of the fight for stronger physical attacks, or the back to focus on doing magic spells. I'm a huge fan of this, and it's a big reason I liked Persona 1's gameplay, to be honest. So to see that come back here was a very nice detail that just makes the game all the more engaging. As I mentioned before too, you have the archetypes to go alongside all this. These are basically the game's equivalent to Personas, in the sense of a special power the characters can awaken. You know, I thought the people saying that Metaphor is too similar to Persona were exaggerating, but no joke, the second I saw them making a speech to someone they oppose, I already knew exactly what was about to happen. Anyway, the way these archetypes work compared to Personas is much more different and, dare I say, pretty neat. The way it works is archetypes have their different skill set and approach to a fight. For example, you have Seeker, who's very versatile with wind magic and can do some physical attacks, and the Knight, who's good with specifically physical attacks with his sword. The neat thing here is, despite having a select amount of archetypes, all of these can be used by any of your party members. All you have to do is pay a fee with its own kind of currency, and so long as you keep using said archetype in battles, they'll level up and get stronger. It's honestly really cool, and it encourages you to be prepared for any kind of situation. You can customize your party member's archetype with different skills by inheriting them too, which is really nice for unique builds. So then, how do you get more of these archetypes? Well, aside from a few you get by progressing the story, a lot of these will be unlocked by increasing your bond level with the characters. Bonds in this game are basically the game's social links. Get to know a character better and also get a neat little reward on top of it. Honestly, having these archetypes behind the bond is a pretty good way of encouraging people to get as many bonds as they can. That combined with Persona's calendar system, it'll be pretty fun to see how the story progresses. Last but not least, let's talk about the graphics and music. Graphically, this game is amazing. The UI, the aesthetic of the world, just everything about this game in a visual sense is pure eye candy. I was really excited to see how this game would look and run considering it was releasing on all the newer platforms, with the exception of the PS4. I, as usual, got the PC version of the game, and my god, it runs beautifully. This UI with the paint splashes and strong colors is also really nice to look at. Music is alright. It's a very unique take with some opera choruses like in the battle theme, but it's just personally not for me. It's very fitting for what they're trying to get at here though, no denying that. So what's it going to come down to? Should you buy Metaphor ReFantazio? Well, it really depends on what you like to see in an Atlas game. If you're someone who loves stories focused on the lore, how they expand it with a focus on fantasy, this is the perfect game for you. There's so much passion and love put into this, and you can tell they took their time trying to make all of it work. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of medieval fantasy settings in my stories, but this is probably the most invested I've been in one in a long time. However, if you enjoy the more grounded and realistic settings, or are just more of a fan of Persona, I'd definitely wait for a sale on this one. Sadly, as far as I'm aware, it's not on Game Pass, so I can understand if $70 is too much to ask. However, I highly encourage you to give the demo a try if you haven't. It's what sold me on this game in the end, and it offers a lot of content for you to check out. Who knows, maybe it can do the same for you too. For a year that's by far been one of the best for Atlas, with several games selling over 1 million copies, it's really nice to see that we're still getting one more release before this fantastic year for them ends. Now, if you excuse me, I have a Sonic production to finish. I truly gotta go fast with this one, am I right? Well, back to Metaphor.